He's a Cosmo figure who spent part of his childhood abroad. He's a product of the Ivy League, who did himself no favors in 2008 when he said people were clinging, basically, to guns or religion or antipathy to people who aren't like them, or anti-immigrant sentiment or anti-trade sentiment as a way to explain their frustrations. According to Carney, he doesn't relate well to flyover country. You know what flyover country is. It's outside the cities. His eliteness, his disdain for things that are more traditional America is more the reason why he's disconnected to this large portion of the country than his race. All of this, according to this NPR article, his ideology, his background, his manner, his unforgettable fact of his race bleed together, making him a figure held in a type of disdain that's notable even in an era of heavily polarized politics. Obama's race and Ivy League background and the sense of his elitism, all of those come together to make his case the worst we've seen, says Smith. I don't know if I agree so much with all of what he said. I don't feel a need to put my view on this forward yet. What I will agree with is I haven't seen this kind of hatred in America for a president ever. I just haven't. This takes on a brand new level of vitriol. I mean, it's nasty, folks. I am incredibly surprised that there has not been a serious attempt on his life. That surprises me. There have been some potshot stuff going on. Especially considering the shortfalls of the Secret Service, at least over the past 6 years. I'm sure there's a whole flushing going on right now after that last incident. Let's see what you guys are saying in chat. Make sure I haven't really heard RT talk about gay issues. That's a good point there. Russia Today, as long as it doesn't talk about Russia, Ukraine. You don't want them talking about gay issues. Yeah, they don't like they don't like gay over there. Very conservative in that way. Is that correct? That's been my impression of Russians. In fact, they claim it doesn't happen over there. You get a lot of people claiming it just doesn't happen, and that's silly. They had a guy on the show. Actually, it was on Jon Stewart's show recently that represented gays in Russia. So he's going to be a target. I can assure you of that. For Europeans, it's very hard to grasp. Fox is real. It comes across as comedy. Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I think it's worse than comedy because they're not very funny. I mean, at least Jon Stewart makes people laugh. They try to pass their stuff off as fact. NPR is left-leaning. Yeah, true. So please note of its confirmation bias, just as Obama haters would use Fox News. Yeah, NPR is left-leaning. That's true. But this article was trying to encapsulate all the reasons that people hate Obama. So I didn't detect an angle there. I think they were trying to use all of them, and I think they probably missed a couple. You know, some people just cannot stand the fact that he was a community organizer, which seems like something that's not professional. I don't know a better way to stay in touch with human beings that are at their worst. Financially than to be a community organizer. I don't know. I think it's a good thing to have on your resume. I think the problem with Obama is he wasn't old enough. He didn't have enough experience. He should have stayed in the Senate maybe 10, 15 more years. I think that would have made him more widely accepted, but maybe I'm wrong. So anyway, he's gone in 2 years. He's gone, okay? And that is something that I'm welcoming, regardless of whether or not I think he's a good president or not. I cannot wait until he's gone, because the stench of this hatred that I keep smelling on various programs and many news sources, it's just getting old. So is it going to be any different if a Hillary gets in? Is it going to be any different if a Chris Christie gets in? Where's it going to come from then? And what's the cause of it going to be? What parts of those people will the American public hate? We're very divided right now, folks, and the media is not helping that at all. What about working together? What about coming together over common ground and putting aside differences for a while? Is that impossible? Why do we go into it looking for the fight now? We go into it looking for the fight. That's what our major talk show hosts have led us to. That's what our major news sources and their bias have led us to. Racist by default. You can't really blame them for not getting that. Yeah, you're right, because people that listen to them and like them, after 9/11, I was glued to Fox News for like 2 years. It took me almost 2 years to realize what was happening at Fox News. And I realized it on my own. I didn't have to read about it. And I realized that they were definitely serving the agenda of the right. And it wasn't their fault. Rupert Murdoch set it up from the beginning with a purpose. And to come across and say fair and balanced with a big picture of the American flag, I've got a picture of the American flag on my profile picture, and I actually like to try to be fair and balanced. Compare something I do to what an MSNBC does or a Fox News does. If you're going to be fair and balanced, be fair and balanced. Don't claim it if you're not. Now, they are a balancing act to the left, some of the left media, but they are themselves not balanced. They're not. What are you going to do? Put Alan Combs up against a Hannity? You're calling that balanced? Think about that for a minute. She started off in politics as a hardcore conservative. I didn't know that. Hillary did. I was like that, Kev, a hardcore Muslim-bashing right-wing idiot just 3 years ago. They had me, but I got out. That's good, man. That's good, RD, because I think what's important with human beings is to realize that we're really no better than anyone else. Their religion may have them somewhat blinded to reason. Religion is more of an emotional experience, so reason doesn't always come into play. And I don't hate people for that. I wish they would be more reasonable, and I think the laws need to force them to be more reasonable if they think that not believing can be adequate evidence for a death sentence for somebody. That's not cool with me. If your religion says it's okay to kill a non-believer, fuck your religion. And I mean that from my heart. Human beings have a right to exist. They have a right to exist without having religion shoved down their throat. And they have a right to practice that religion without you shoving atheism down their throat, as long as they're not harming anybody in the practice of that religion. I think that should be a fundamental human right. You should be able to speak out on what you believe without persecution from your own government or society. And we have a lot of persecution here in the U.S., not from the government. It comes from society. You believe certain things, you can't talk about them, or you're going to pay a price. It's like that in most civilizations. There are these things you just can't talk about, or you will pay a price. So, I don't know. I don't know about that, but let's get back to the topic. Yes, I do believe that Fox News is far right. I do believe that they're narrow-minded, that there's a lot of hate in that network, that there are only a few smart people that typically show up on there. And Newt Gingrich is an incredibly intelligent guy, and I have a lot of respect for his intelligence. He's on there on the Crossfire segments. I don't believe Bill O'Reilly has anything more than a lot of anger, and people dig that. I'm sorry, some people that like to be angry dig that, so they jump on that ride with them. Not a lot of intelligence there. If you talk to intellectuals, nobody's going to tell you Bill O'Reilly's a bright guy. He's a fighter. He's a bully, and people tend to like that stuff. It's no different than the people that went to the Roman Colosseum to watch the gladiators get beheaded and have to fight lions. So that's what happens. His guests get beheaded as he gets them. When he starts losing, I can tell you when Bill O'Reilly starts losing, there's two things you want to look for: over-talking and volume. That's how you know he's losing. If he's winning, he's very cool and collected, got a smile on his face. New York Post is talking about selective outrage. Okay, this was an article by Linda Chavez, and it's bullshit. It's bullshit. It was written on 5/5/2014, or published that day anyway, and they're talking about the racism that was shown by what was his name? Donald Sterling, the owner of the LA Clippers. All right, they were comparing that and the things that he said to Congressional Black Caucus member Republican Benny Thompson hurling a racial epithet at Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Okay, so we got two blacks, and his comments barely raise an eyebrow. Apparently calling a member of Congress Uncle Tom, apparently a member of Congress calling Thomas an Uncle Tom, and doing so in a program sponsored by the New Nation of Islam, no less, is acceptable. No, that's not selective outrage, New York Post. I'm sorry, you must not have read the definition. When a black person calls a black person something, the equivalent of that on the other side would be a white person calling a white person something. Now, if you want to call this selective outrage, what you want to do is take Donald Sterling and have him talking about white people, calling them wiggers, or calling them, honkies, crackers. That's the equivalent. You cannot try to equivocate a white man talking about black people with a black man talking about black people. Now, I agree that black people throwing the N-word around should not be okay. But if you want to have combat that, do what I did. I started saying honky to people. I started calling people cracker. I did. My white friends, I call them cracker all the time. Hey, good for the goose, good for the gander. Make it equal. I'm all about equality. All right, but don't try to equivocate this and then call it selective outrage. Well, they're mad at Donald Sterling for what he said, but they're not mad at Benny Thompson. You know, called him an Uncle Tom and nobody said anything. Well, maybe if Sterling had called white people crackers, this wouldn't have been news. It's a whole different story, my friends, and it has a lot to do with the history in America. And if you know the history in America, even the ugly parts, from the first boat of Africans that arrived right on up to Selma, and many things since then you know it's a little bit different. This requires you as a white person to put yourself in a black person's shoes. Just do it. Just do it on your free time. Do it on the weekends. Take 10 minutes and imagine being a black person, coming up with everything that they have come up with. What you have here, what we typically have with racism in America, is a white person saying, if I were black, I wouldn't act like this. True, but if you were black, you wouldn't be you. So that's almost a moot point. If you were black, you would have the history that black person has. You would have experienced the culture and society that black person experienced, and you would have the genetic composition of whatever makes up their body and brain. So if you were black, what you would do is irrelevant. You're not. You're not. So what you would do, thinking that that's what they should do, is very self-centered and egotistical. And that goes for black people, saying, if I were white, I'd do this. No, you wouldn't, because you'd be white. You'd have a whole different history. You'd have a whole different DNA. You know, that's craziness. This is something we need to understand. Taking a walk in somebody else's shoes, something we fail to do in this country as a matter of routine, and our divisive media outlets love to expose the division, divide and conquer, keep us separated, keep us fighting. There's a quote I want to share with you about that, keeping people divided. And it also is from a source that I trust. This is going to take me another minute to find out. Power tends to corrupt. We already know about that. Oh, I got to read that one to you in a minute. Here it is, and this is from H.L. Mencken, okay? The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety, in other words, desperate for help, to get away from the boogeyman, by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. Now, it would be difficult to say that within the context of 9/11, because that turned out to be a real goblin. But how often are the real goblins popping up compared to the warnings that the government gives you to try to get into your life a little bit deeper? You know the quote about trading security for freedom, trading your freedoms for security, and I believe in that one. And you won't have either if you trade your freedom for security, and you don't deserve either. Hang on to that freedom for Christ's sake. You may have to give up a little bit of security, but it's worth the price. Mark Twain said, suppose you were an idiot and suppose you were a member of Congress, but I repeat myself. Well, that's kind of mean. I mean, these Congress people, don't we elect them? If they were really idiotic, would we even vote at all? I mean, wouldn't we try to put a write-in in there? You know, that just bothers me. You're attacking these people and they're from your own ranks. They're educated folks. They just may have some power issues once they get in. They may have some pressure issues from different people that might be funding their campaigns, and it's hard to keep an honest person honest once they get in power. So they fall. They flounder. Cal Thomas said, one of the reasons people hate politics is that truth is rarely a politician's objective. Election and power are. And I think that's a good point. We're going to talk a little bit more about these quotes, which I find that people tend to put a little extra weight on what famous people said about a thing.